What is great, good, and real? Good morning, and God bless. I want to thank myself for being here today. And that sounds very vain, but I think significant and important. If you can't continue to be grateful for the life you choose to live, then whose life are you living? Because when you're living the life you're choosing you to live for yourself, you should just feel grateful for everything you get to do. So if it's for you, if it's the mic, it's the business, it's the career, the community you're helping, whatever it is, be thankful you get to do that. Let's work, man. You're living off a scroll that was never yours. If your daily protocol was printed, whose name would be in the byline? You've been quoting authors who never earned your reverence, performing processes you never wrote, following values you never chose, living from scrolls that never passed through your own fire. You call it discipline. I call it possession. You call it structure. I call it soul outsourcing. That's why you can't be grateful you're alive today. Warning: this transmission will burn ghost-written identities. Side effects may include sudden grief over how long you've lived somebody else's life. Damn. Guilt from routines that never fulfilled your spirit. Confusion about who you are when the to-do list is gone. And a violent urge to build something original. How about yourself? Welcome to Raw for Epoch 2, day 143. This is System Authorship. And today, we rip up the ghost-written scrolls and start writing in our own blood. Here's our concept overview for the day. It's titled System Authorship. Your system is not just how you live, it's who you've given permission to live through you. When your values are not your own, your victories never feel like yours. When your protocol is plagiarized, your identity becomes counterfeit. And worst of all, you teach your family how to live that same lie. Here's what you'll learn today. You got a worst of all before we even hit the consequences. Damn. We're learning why borrowed routines block spiritual authorship. How systems become spiritual idols, if not soul selected. The difference between inherited wisdom and inherited obedience. Why spiritual authorship requires system override. And how to identify what part of your scroll is still ghost written. Some people make a good living off of ghostwriting. You're going to find out how cultures have been built off of it. Here's our visual metaphor for the day. The stolen script. Picture this, imagine this, immerse yourself. Don't close your eyes today. You're on stage, lights hot, audience is full. You walk to the mic, reach for the script, and realize it's not yours. You've been rehearsing somebody else's lines. The director was never God. It was pressure, programming, and possession. And you're nailing a role you never auditioned for. Except the real you is backstage, watching the whole thing in silence. Who's writing your script? Here's my personal perspective. I call this the ghost in the scroll, and I want to make this clear off the rip. We are each unique, infinite in potential, but not so special. You got hype right there, didn't you? That we've escaped the plague of inherited thoughts. Because even your originality was baptized into a belief system you didn't choose. You see, we talk a lot about system authorship, but you can't talk authorship if you've never audited the ink in your pen. Your words, your values, your worldview, your God. All of it was written on you before you ever wrote with it. And for me, the deeper I got with God, the more I had to confess. Most of what I believed, I never chose. It was downloaded from culture, carved by trauma, and encrypted in loyalty to systems that never asked my soul for permission. But here's where it gets wild, at least in the mind of cliche Jeff. We yearn to identify uniquely, but we fear the release of the identity we currently protect. That is the conundrum of spiritual evolution. If I decide I could be something different, what does that mean for who I am right now? What happens to the debts owed to my old self? What happens to how I will be viewed? To what I'll owe the world that validated my current scroll? And that fear will paralyze you from ever rewriting the story. So I started to do something different. I began a practice. I literally call on my soul to move forward. No blocks, no barricades, no external memories. Just an intentional regression into pre-memory, a direct return to what existed before story. And when you strip everything back to that blank slate, ooh, it is terrifying. And why? Not just because it's dark and you're alone and you start to question what you're doing, but it's because we were taught to see, taught how to see, taught how to be seen, taught to perform the image we believe others would love. But when I sit in that place of nothing, I begin to touch God. And suddenly, everything I feared letting go of becomes irrelevant in the presence of the infinite. Why do you think I talk about touching God so much? My memory clears, my identity unhooks, and for the first time, I am seen without performing. And that's where true authorship begins, not in the scroll you inherited, but in the one your soul remembers from the silence before the script. We're going to get into our black book. Where the chat at? I've been dropping little teasers, if you would, about this. No blocks, no barriers, no barricades, no limits, no restrictions. The idea and the concept, I believe it came from the Kabbalists, staring into the back of your head, trying to identify with the nothingness, wiping your soul from memory in order to return it to its sort of pre-existence state. Understand what I'm trying to express here. Because of how our minds work, because of memory, because of how we've been provided culture and told and taught what to believe, which a lot aligns with how you are to be seen. We cling to that. We identify with that. And naturally, I believe all of us reach an inflection point of where am I at, where am I going? And the where am I at and where am I going has to align with who am I and who am I currently being? Because we start to project, who do I need to be? Who can I be? But I think of great significance, how you got to where you were and what brought you there. Naturally, a lot of what that experience is for all of us is life. It's the roller coaster of life. It's everything that we're sort of indoctrinated into as part of the social structure. You're born into a family. Families are families, man. Families are wild. You're brought up in environments, whether or not you come from one similar to mine or not. It's wild. It gives you massive just memory about what you believe you think you are. And if you correlate it like, yo, why do I believe all these things? You were told to believe that. And if you baseline level set, effectively what you're saying is you were told what to believe about yourself. So this practice for me is like, how do I delete that? It's not necessarily forgetting it. It's clearing the path. Because the significance for me is this: if I can bring my soul back to the forefront, if I can feel my soul touch God and touch the infinite, what is that? That's before I had a chance to be imprinted on. That's before the madness and the wildness. It's not to suggest that the madness and the wildness is not going to persist and continue. In fact, man, for me, it only gets wilder. But I want to return to pre-scripted state. Why? It offers me the possibility to understand how to re-script. Acceptance of the past, coming to presence. You just cannot change where you are. You can't. But yet we want to change who we are. But left to understand who we want to identify with in the future in contrast to who we've always been is frightening, because then you ask yourself, well, who am I really? There's like a who am I really I want to go be and attain and become. And there's who am I really to attain and become, because what does that mean for all I've done? You start to feel like, well, have I been a complete failure up until this point? For me, it's like I understand nothing I believed was accurate from the perspective of I never really gained that wisdom on my own or had that level of applied knowledge. I just followed what was shown to me. And of course, I mean, maybe not of course, but it's natural. It was natural for me to identify with, okay, if I know all this, then what don't I know? Because what haven't I exposed myself to? Business will do that for you too. You think the boardroom and the executive level is so much different than what happens at other pecking order levels, from the front line all the way up to the ivory tower. It's just another group of people in a different room doing the same things at different levels. Maybe it's a higher level, an expanded level. It's no different. They're just exposed. They're exposed culturally to different things. They get new knowledge. They re-script what they were, where they were at, and how they proceed forward. Spiritually, I mean, it's the same thing. The biggest challenge for me was my evolution with God. It was like I was introduced into Catholicism. I followed every Sunday, and then I stopped believing for a while, and then I had a moment. I got a message, and then how do I compare that? Like, well, who is God? I had to learn that for myself, which is why I believe in spirit so deeply, why I believe in God so deeply. If you can learn and appreciate what God and infinite means to you, then you open up and broaden your scope to do that everywhere else across the spectrum of your life. That's what it is. Wiping the slate clean, not to demean yourself or diminish everything about your life and where you've been or forget who you were. It's more to understand, okay, I can become because I've already become. I just have to reignite that process. Let's go into the black book. Spiritual system mechanics. Let's get surgical. Every system carries a spirit. If you're running a system authored in fear, you're living under spiritual arrest. Systems are not neutral. They reflect their origin, either rooted in source or rooted in survival. Your subconscious, check this out, is older than your decisions. Most of us are just running inherited code, generational, cultural, religious, professional. The reason your growth doesn't feel good is because it wasn't built for your spirit. Real authorship requires alignment before automation. If you automate before you author, you become efficient in self-betrayal. Spiritual systems must be built around identity, not urgency. System override is soul protection. If the routine is draining you, it's not a discipline, it is a demon. Auditing your protocol isn't optional, it's survival. We use these words as somewhat interchangeable. You're surviving out of fear, and you're accepting everything about your your weight in life. What's your weight class in life? Some of you are still lightweights. I talked about the beauty of being a man and the reality that a lot of men are stuck in adolescent mindsets. A lot of us who can't seem to prosper and find growth are stuck in fear-derived consciousness. You're just surviving. However, and in the same way, you go for growth, you go to a love-based consciousness, you're still surviving. But I have to survive in the way of growth in order to survive against stagnation, stasis, and the paralyzation of my soul. So choose which way you want to survive. There are consequences. Here are consequences of inaction. If you keep running someone else's scroll, you'll perfect a system that was never meant to sustain your purpose. You'll teach your children and your future how to mimic instead of how to author. You'll confuse obedience with oppression. You'll master the mechanics of movement, but never move your soul. You'll spend a lifetime executing somebody else's dream and call it discipline. And worst of all, you will build somebody else's heaven and never experience your own. Let's get into our actually, let's check the chat real quick. Where you at, chat? Where you at, chat? This is big. You out there being authored? You out there being authored? We're going to get straight into our creation covenant loop for today, where we audit, remix, and re-record. We start with an audit. Ask yourself these questions. Where did your current system come from? Who taught you what success looks like? A lot of unsuccessful people are trying to teach success. Imagine that. Some of you have to tell your closest relatives, the people closest to your circle, stop telling me what to do in my life. You're so focused on what I should do, you're not even doing what you got to do for yourself. And how would you know what success looks like if you don't have success for yourself? I don't know. I don't like to learn from people who aren't doing what they say what they say you should do. People who give you better advice than they give themselves, or at least encourage you to follow more of their advice than they follow for themselves. I don't know. I question that. When you move throughout your day, do you feel energized or enslaved? Here's what you want to look for. The tasks that feel obligatory but offer no joy. The routines that used to serve you but now silence you. The scrolls you inherited that were never meant for your soul. Do you light up on the inside about your life? Well, that's why I started how I started today. So happy I get the mic. Yeah, sometimes, it feels better than others. Sometimes I question. It's natural. But I don't have to worry about what it does for my soul. What are you doing for your soul? And then how do you transcend that? Today, you could do one thing to focus back in on your soul. And at the very minimum, you'll have a time slot dedicated just for your soul, and watch how that changes your life. Watch how you go seek your soul more often. Oh, you're not gonna subscribe to that for $24.99 a month. You want me to tell you you're gonna fix your soul by fixing your body in 45 days or less, even though you've been destroying your body for the last 20 years. Go ahead, go buy that subscription, see what happens. Fix your soul first. Watch how your body follows. Then you want to hit it with the remix. This is our thought identity portion. Shift the thought. I'm doing this because I have to. There's a cliche in this space. I get to. But for us, we want to say, I author the protocol. I don't perform somebody else's, right? You don't have to do anything that you're doing. I used this the other day because, and I've used this before. I was having a conversation with my wife and a neighbor. And again, it's how do I let go? How do I release? How do I detach? All those things. And all these things are a problem. All these things are a problem. I use the line from the gentleman that's the Shaolin master. Every time I go to reference his name, I forget it. And he says very, very succinctly, if you believe you have a problem, let your body become a problem and watch how many problems you start not to have. So you think you have to do certain things because you don't really have a problem. I encourage you to start figuring it out before things really become a problem, before you really have to start doing certain things. You get to live life. You may as well choose how you get to live life. How about a new thought, right? Every system I run must reflect my spirit. I don't optimize old scrolls. I write new ones. Get that pen out. Start a new chapter and verse. I don't execute from fear. I build from remembrance. The more you trigger your soul, the more you will remember to return to your soul, the more you will remember who you want to be. Then we get into our action identity. Start writing your scroll. Literally. Write out your personal protocol. Morning ritual core values. Daily practices, weekly audits, spiritual maintenance, emotional overrides, relationship priorities, financial behaviors. If you're going to be routined the way that you want to be routined. If you're not auditing yourself, I told you I do it almost in the moment. It's definitely daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. That's a good business practice. There isn't a successful business in the world who doesn't run an audit. Treat yourself like a business. You can work yourself through emotional overrides. You don't have to crash out every time you feel a little bit of stress, anger, or overwhelm. What are your priorities in your relationship? I've been married for 18 years, together 25. You got to keep growing with it. They change. I'm in my 40s now. We were in our teenage years. That was much different. What are the priorities? If it's not marriage, your friendships, your network. If they don't serve your soul, they got to go. If your system isn't authored, it's automated. In this way, you can author your automation. If it's automated without authorship, it's demonic. You are building your own hell. You will have to answer to you at one time in your life. I just pray it isn't because something has become a problem that wasn't previously a problem. Don't die as a performer. Live as a prophet of your own protocol. When the world asks you who you are, don't quote somebody else. Hand them your scroll. Own it or be owned by it. You either run the system or the system runs you. Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich.